today. You are now looking live at a roundtable discussion in honor of Chinese President Xi Jinping, who you can see there in the middle, who is speaking right now. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron is holding this roundtable meeting alongside his counterpart Xi Jinping at the Élysée Palace. Let's go live to the scene now and take a listen.
We need to understand each other much better in order to move forward. As we all know that the world is undergoing major changes, rarely seen in a century. And a human being is at a juncture. China, France, and Europe are all at a critical point for self-development. For my visit this time, I would like to work together with France and the people from France to inherit the history and forge ahead so that we can push forward a comprehensive strategic partnership between China and France. We would like to seek a common development and a beautiful world together. We would like to make concerted efforts in this regard. Thank you.
Okay, and we have just been listening to Chinese President Xi Jinping live at a roundtable discussion there in Paris at the Élysée Palace. And standing by for us live outside of the palace is our correspondent, Stefan de Vries. So, Stefan, this year marks 55 years of diplomatic ties between these two countries. What exactly are France's expectations from President Xi Jinping's visit, you think?
Well, of course, President Xi Jinping is coming to Europe this week to make the European partners clear that China can be a reliable and an important partner for the future. There have been some debates here in Europe over the last couple of weeks, most notably about the new role of China. The European Commission last week described China as a systemic rival. So China is now, of course, seen as not only as an opportunity but also as a threat. At the same time, the European Union knows that it needs China, and of course, in a world where the balance between powers are shifting, where the role of the USA is becoming less important than it was in the past, and especially for the European Union, the Europeans know that they need to have a good relationship with China. But there are many questions about China's intentions, and probably this visit this week to Italy, yesterday in Monaco and today and tomorrow in France, of President Xi Jinping will clarify China's position and also China's ambitions when it comes to the partnership with the European Union. And that's the reason why tomorrow the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel will also come here to Paris, to the Élysée, to meet up with President Xi Jinping, because Emmanuel Macron wants to make clear that it's not only about France, and France realizes that it is too small and that it really needs the European Union as a whole to discuss the relationships with China. So that's on the program today. There will be some announcements made, maybe in a couple of minutes in the Élysée Palace during a press statement. And then President Xi Jinping will retire to his hotel. And then tonight there is a state dinner with many guests, French and Chinese, from the world of arts, politics, entertainment, sports. A very official state dinner here in the palace. And then tomorrow there will be a meeting with the European leaders, the governance conference, as it is called. And then at the end of the day, President Xi Jinping will go back to China, and that will mean the end of his European trip.
Okay, and Stefan de Vries live for us in Paris. Stay with me here, Stefan, though. We were just looking live there inside the Élysée Palace there, listening to President Xi Jinping speaking at that roundtable discussion with many leaders around the table there. We're French politicians, including, of course, French President Emmanuel Macron. Okay, we want to bring in now a professor at American Graduate School in Paris, Jove Toker. So, Professor, thank you so much for joining us. You know, something that our correspondent just brought up, which is really interesting, is that tomorrow it won't just be Xi Jinping and Emmanuel Macron, but also Angela Merkel, and Jean-Claude Juncker. Talk to us about how important this meeting is, especially the timing of this meeting ahead of the EU-China summit.
Indeed, because what we're seeing right now in real time happening around the discussion table at the Elysee Palace is important and significant and completes what has already been launched by both Presidents Macron and President Xi on the Riviera on the southern coast of France yesterday evening, and will continue later tonight with a state dinner at the Elysee Palace. But I would suspect that what is going to happen at the Elysee Palace tomorrow, Tuesday, will be even more interesting. It is the first time such an initiative, which in a way was navigated through the particular ambition of President Macron, to try to find a way between, on one hand, the clear ambitions of China to develop the Belt and Road initiatives in a wider sense, as wide as possible. And on the other hand, the hesitations of many European countries, members of the EU, in terms of how should Europe understand this initiative. So what does Macron doing actually? He's inviting German Chancellor Merkel and the President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, to come over tomorrow and to sit together with him and with President Xi and try to see whether there are some intelligent, more advanced way of calming each other's suspicions, perhaps. Now, will it succeed? Will it just be one step? We don't know yet. But this is very important when it comes to the Belt and Road Initiative per se, and it's very important also to the level of cohesion between European countries, because not all of them agree, of course, with the approach of President Macron and most probably the Chancellor Merkel. So we have an exercise in global politics, in global economy, in the very wide sense, the global in the sense which links Europe with China, with Asia. And on the other hand, we have an extremely important exercise in European internal diplomacy and arrangements, just 2 months before there are going to be general elections for the European Parliament, which are going to take place towards the end of May.
Absolutely. Those are excellent points to make. I want to keep talking about this, though, because it is really interesting here. One of the things that these leaders were talking about was that they want to have this meeting to explore, quote, points of convergence. Talk to us about what those points may be.
There could be many points in convergence, and the specialists actually have prepared for President Macron, I'm sure for President Xi as well, a long list which is extremely appetizing, because you can go so far if you actually put goodwill and an optimism into what two countries such as France or Germany and China could do together if there is a confidence, if there is belief that no party is trying to gain all kind of excessive advantage. You have to understand that the French, for example, what they see in real situation right now is that their commercial deficit is just blowing up with the Chinese. Like more than half of the overall French deficit in international commerce is due to the deficit with China, about $30 billion per year. So when some of them try to see what is there behind Chinese intentions when it comes to the Belt and Road initiatives and other initiatives, it would be natural for them to ask, will the Chinese be even stronger if we just cooperate the same way we have cooperated up to now? Or should we perhaps inject into new equations of cooperation something which would seem to be more equal, more egalitarian in those overall relations, economic, diplomatic, commercial, and others, between the European Union and China? And of course, this is why Macron prefers negotiating with the Chinese through the vehicle, if you wish, of the European Union. France counts 68 million inhabitants. The EU counts 500 million inhabitants. You're so much stronger when you actually 10 times larger, where you discuss with a giant such as China.
Yeah, quite a smart move, and should be a really interesting meeting, and look forward to what comes out of it. All right, professor at American Graduate School in Paris, Jove Toker, thank you so much. And joining us live in the studio here is Professor Zhang Gang, University of International Business and Economics. All right, so sort of a bigger, broader question between these two countries specifically. What's the most important thing you think China would like to get out of cooperating with France?
We got a chance to hear a little bit of the beginning speech by President Xi, and he mentioned that the world is changing and that he hopes to keep what he describes as a comprehensive strategic partnership with France. I think that is the most important thing that China is looking for in terms of protecting and keeping and continuing the multilateral system that the American led to set up 70 years ago. That includes the institutions, international governance, the United Nations, the WTO, and other very important international organizations. I think China hopes that France would continue to play a very important role in terms of protecting this institutional arrangement.
But what's that big thing that China really could use at this point that France could help China, even if it's just bettering relations with the EU on the whole?
Well, I think aside from the economic relations, the European Union side understands that the world is changing. The United States is taking a very different approach now, especially the Trump administration, and is probably withdrawing some of the commitments to these international organizations. And I think we want to see a world that's not falling apart because of that move. I think that we still want to keep onto the system that was set up many years ago. And the anchoring forces right now, other than the United States, is just China and the European Union, and France and Germany play a very important role in that capacity.
And that's why tomorrow's meeting will be very interesting. All right, Professor Zhang Gang from the University of International Business and Economics, thank you so much for staying with us through this live coverage here of President Xi's trip to Europe today in France. All right, and we have much more international news straight ahead. Stay with us. You're watching The World Today.
You've traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you. But only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog, or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
A journey to the top of the world, to a place few have visited. Join CGTN in Tibet, 60 years after its peaceful liberation. Watch how an Asian land now looks to the future. For 10 days, we travel hundreds of kilometers through remote mountain villages. Come with us as we explore how Tibet is honoring old traditions and embracing new industries. Special coverage from Tibet on CGTN.
And welcome back to a special edition of The World Today. British Prime Minister Theresa May has been making an all-out effort to push through a resolution to the Brexit impasse on the floor of Parliament in London.
Were the House not to pass the statutory instrument, it would cause legal confusion and damaging uncertainty, but it would not have any effect on the date. But it would not have any effect on the date of our exit. Mr. Speaker, I continue to believe that the right path forward is for the United Kingdom to leave the EU as soon as possible with a deal, now on the 22nd of May. But it is with great regret that I have had to conclude that as things stand, there is still not sufficient support in the House to bring back the deal for a third meaningful vote.
Thank you, Mr.
The country
Speaker.
is scheduled to leave the EU at the end of this week, but a deeply divided parliament leaves very little certainty on how or even if that exit will happen. The Prime Minister's deal has already been defeated twice in Parliament by resounding margins. She says it's too late to change the deal, but assured lawmakers that if they agreed to vote it through, the EU would be willing to extend the withdrawal deadline until May 22nd. The alternative, though, is a no-deal Brexit, which many say would be catastrophic. Israeli authorities say a rocket launched from the Gaza Strip has struck a house in central Israel, wounding 6 people. The early Monday morning attack hit Mishmeret, an agricultural town north of Tel Aviv. Israel's commercial capital and outlying communities last came under such an attack during the 2014 war with Gaza's Hamas Islamists. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet with American President Donald Trump in Washington on Monday. This comes after Trump's statement last week on the disputed Golan Heights. With the signing of an official order, the United States would be the first country to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the region. Meanwhile, members of the Druze community in the Golan Heights protested on Saturday against the American president's decision. CGTN's Stephanie Fried has more from Tel Aviv.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's U.S. visit was meant to be a moment of glory for Israel's leader, one that could potentially bolster his popularity in the lead-up to an April election. Mr. Netanyahu will retain a piece of that glory. His Washington meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump is still on schedule. During the meeting, the U.S. president is expected to announce an executive order officially recognizing the Golan Heights area that Israel captured from Syria in 1967 as sovereign Israel terrain. But right after the meeting, Israel's prime minister is hightailing it back home.
In light of the latest security developments, I have decided to cut short my U.S. visit. In the coming hours, I will meet with President Trump. Immediately afterwards, I will return to Israel to manage our response from close range.
Earlier this month, 2 rockets fired from Gaza toward Tel Aviv marked the first launch of its kind into central Israel in half a decade. Israel's security apparatus later said the twin launch was a mistake. Opposition leaders accused the prime minister of not adequately safeguarding Israel's residents. Impending retaliation for Monday's rocket hit, combined with the Washington meeting, will likely boost the prime minister's numbers at the polls. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
All right, now to the latest on the chemical plant explosion in Jiangsu County of eastern China's Jiangsu province. As of today, the accident has so far left 78 people dead, nearly 80 severely injured. And as rescue work nears its conclusion, questions on the full impact of the incident remain unanswered. CGTN's Xu Mengxi has more.
In the aftermath of one of China's worst industrial accidents, more than 36 acres of land contaminated, dozens of houses damaged beyond repair, and families torn apart. Who is to blame?
On both sides of the Grand River lie a dense concentration of chemical plants situated in 3 industrial parks. Now, for local residents and authorities, their existence is a dilemma they've been facing for years. On the one hand, they have accidents resulting in death, injuries, and environmental pollution. But on the other, the plants are the pillars of local economic development.
62-year-old Wu Liliang had been working in one of the factories in the affected industrial park for 6 years. He says that multiple accidents had led local authorities to inspect the chemical plants from time to time. But between the two, it's a game of cat and mouse.
The factories all operate secretly. If we are working and inspectors come, they'll say, "Hurry, shut down the factory." And we all hide ourselves so the inspectors won't see us.
Wu's fingertips are all colored by the chemicals his factory was producing. And previously, during minor accidents, he had felt lucky that it wasn't his plant. But this time, things have changed.
We all know it's a chronic suicide to work in a chemical plant, but I had no choice. This was the job I took. But now I just wish the industrial park was gone. That will put everyone at ease.
The affected industrial park is now completely sealed, but the environmental impact of chemical leaks resulting from this accident will take much longer to reveal.
After the emergency response comes to an end, we will divide the site into areas with different degrees of contamination. And then, according to that, we will make specific plans for further investigation.
Several kilometers away from ground zero, schools have already opened after authorities confirmed that air quality is now within a normal level. Psychological counselors were brought in to help the children make sense of what happened. And in one of the classes, a teacher tells his pupils that storms are often followed by sunshine. But for these innocent kids, it may take years before they can fully understand what the storm really meant. Xu Mengqi, CGTN, Xiangshui, Jiangsu Province.
The 2019 Boao Forum for Asia begins tomorrow and runs through March 29th. The annual gathering takes place each year in China's southern Hainan province. CGTN has designed a special series called the Boao Guide, giving you a daily preview of the highlights of the various sessions taking place each day at the Boao Forum. CGTN's Zoyun is here with a sneak peek at the hot button issues set for day one.
What to watch out for and who should you listen to? What are some of the topics that will not only dominate the agenda, but also shape the future of China and Asia? Hello and welcome to the Boao Guide, a quick daily update that gives you a heads up of the upcoming attractions throughout the day. I'm Zoe reporting from Boao. The first day of the forum will be kicked off with the release of 4 flagship reports. They focus on Asia economic integration, emerging markets as represented by E11, which refers to the 11 emerging economies in the G20, and also competitiveness ranking of Asian economies, and finally a new one that focuses on the status and prospects of the infrastructure financing in Asia. Moreover, with the world facing growing uncertainties and challenges, the trajectory of the global economy is being closely watched. So a session on the global economic outlook will be another highlight of day one as well, with high-profile speakers such as Zhang Tao, who's the Deputy Managing Director of IMF, will offer a visionary explanation of future growth drivers. Last but not least, there's also a session which I think can be called 70-40. In short, 70 stands for the 70 years since the founding of the People's Republic of China, and 40 means 40 years since the country's reform and opening up policy. The panelists are among the most qualified to share their experiences on China's transformation. For instance, Long Yongzhu, who's the chief negotiator for China's WTO accession, and Yue Longping, a past founder for developing hybrid rice in China. So these are the focuses of day one of Boao Forum for Asia. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, China hopes traveling to Tibet may soon become a lot easier. Massive infrastructure projects launched within the past decade are now nearing completion. CGTN's Jonathan Betts has more.
The tranquil isolation of Tibet is suddenly changing. Billions of dollars are pouring in as China pulls this ancient land into the modern world, changing the landscape and lives.
The railway came to our village. People in our village all bought cars. Look at our income now. It's pretty good.
Across Tibet, tracks are being laid for bullet trains and highways to soon crisscross the Himalayas. Already, paved roads now reach all of Tibet's counties, helping bring a surge of tourists and newcomers.
It will closely connect the Tibetan people with the people in the inland.
But the stunning geography that draws so many is also challenging engineers. Workers drove us deep into a remote mountain to show us what they faced digging a train tunnel.
We're about 2 kilometers inside the mountain. You begin to see some of the challenges that workers here are facing. For one, water is pouring into this tunnel.
Nearby crews continue drilling on what's been called the world's most challenging railway. They work around the clock, but are only moving less than a meter a day.
The
most difficult thing we have to overcome is first and foremost the water. The second concern is the lack of oxygen. If we don't take the right precautions, our workers could easily stop breathing while working.
Eventually, this tunnel will help form Tibet's second railway in 2026, a $36 billion project spanning 1,700 kilometers connecting the regional capital, Lhasa, with the Chinese megacity of Chengdu. It will cut a trip that used to take days to hours, which is all the inspiration Liu Jinping needs.
While the circumstances are quite difficult, I'm glad to be building a railway on the Tibetan Plateau, the backbone of the world. I'm very, very proud because this railway we're building is the road to heaven.
New roads to heaven, bringing the roof of the world a little closer to Earth. Jonathan Betts, Linzhe, Tibet.
Workers in 12 Chinese cities will now have their maternity insurance integrated with their basic health care coverage. That's according to the country's state council, which says pilot programs in those cities could be a model for future reforms. Authorities say the experimental merger has functioned smoothly and that they would work to reduce costs going forward.
Integrating the management service force and information system can improve the management service ability and provide more convenient and fast services for the insured units and workers. The unification of medical service management after the merger of the two insurance schemes will help to integrate medical service management resources, further standardize the management of reproductive medical services, and improve the efficiency of fund utilization.
A hospital in China has recently made headlines in conducting the country's first long-distance surgery under the 5G network on a human body. That exploration continues on Monday with another remote surgery in Beijing. Our reporter Wu Guoshu was there to see how the in-head surgery was conducted through the internet.
Dr. Ling Zhipei is on his way to perform a surgery, but not in the operating room. While his team gets the patient ready, Ling's preparation is to set up a laptop and 5G network with the help of China Mobile and Huawei. The procedure? The implantation of a deep brain stimulation device for a patient suffering from Parkinson's disease. Ling's partner Xu Xian says there is no room for mistakes.
The key to the surgery is precision. We are going to detect and then insert a deep brain stimulation device into an area of 1/3 the size of a soybean.
As we speak, surgeons in the operation room have finished trepanning holes in the patient's head. But the key process is done here by Dr. Ling with this computer and the 5G network. He's controlling the instrument remotely and implanting the tiny devices into the patient's head. And the sound we hear now is from the cells detected.
Dr. Ling Zhipei was China's first surgeon to do such DBS implanting for Parkinson's patients back in 1998. With the help of Wi-Fi, he doesn't need to perform alongside the patient anymore. He can control the instrument by reading signals on the laptop or by giving real-time instructions to surgeons. The patient's feedback is obviously seen.
听见吗？感觉怎么样？我是林主任。
I had to fly to other hospitals to help them do their surgery before, but since half a year ago, we have been exploring to do it remotely. Now 5G signals work much better than 4G.
On March the 16th, Ling operated on a patient from 3,000 kilometers away. That was China's first long-distance surgery done via a 5G network on a human body. Ling says in the past 20 years, only about 22,000 Parkinson's patients nationwide received the DBS implant procedure. The surgeries are few at this point, largely due to the 200,000 yuan price, which is not covered by medical insurance. There is also a lack of qualified physicians who can perform them. Dr. Ling hopes 5G can help him operate for more patients and even cooperate with countries along the Belt and Road. 吴国秀 CGTN 北京。
A journey to the top of the world, to a place few have visited. Join CGTN in Tibet, 60 years after its peaceful liberation. Watch how an Asian land now looks to the future. For 10 days, we travel hundreds of kilometers through remote mountain villages. Come with us as we explore how Tibet is honoring old traditions and embracing new industries. Special coverage from Tibet on CGTN.
Welcome back to the special edition of The World Today. Around 30,000 gamers have descended upon San Francisco to attend this year's Game Developers Conference. It's the place where powerhouse gaming companies and startups showcase their latest technologies to inspire creativity. CGTN's Mark New has this great report.
At this year's Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, a human spends quality time with a virtual human.
I'm going to drop this cannonball in.
I soon wear a headset and a backpack that allow me to roam free in a relatively new experience, a virtual reality escape room in Vertigo Games' The Corsair's Curse. After the escape, I try out Vertigo's Arizona Sunshine, a game where I work together virtually with someone I've never actually met in the real world. As we climb, tiptoe, and battle zombies, I'm amazed that the programming is smart enough to keep us from bumping into walls or each other. Free roam VR spaces like this have been expanding to shopping malls throughout the US and many parts of the world.
What it does have the power to do is, you know, if you look at what's behind us, is people playing together. It's sort of like you go to the movies with people. Very, very few people sort of just go to see it by themselves. And I think that dynamic, that social dynamic, drawing people to malls, brings more foot traffic.
And creating game characters through motion capture is becoming simpler and cheaper. With Reallusion's iClone, all you need is an iPhone and their software, and I can drive this character and put on whatever emotion I choose. In fact, this same technology was used to transform actor Keanu Reeves in his most recent film, Replicas.
We provide a bridge for you to create a character, animate a character, and get motion data that's basically only compared to what you could see a few years ago in AAA studios or film studios. Now it's available for everyone.
For the Chinese company Wonder Painter, a drawing takes seconds to capture and then become full of life on screen. And that goes for objects too, and even people like me. The thought of becoming a heroic video game character is no longer a dream. At GDC, experimental games are also working to turn the most dreaded tasks into fun. No! I jumped right on it! And in this game called Robots, players use a TV antenna to tune into a robot's dreams. At GDC, the past and present collide, giving us a vision of what may be to come. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Such a fun assignment. All right, African music has influenced Western music, both directly and indirectly, for generations. And a new crop of African musicians are determined to move beyond that by persuading the rest of the world to enjoy their music on its own terms. CGTN's Owen Faircloth reports from the South by Southwest Music Festival in Texas.
Olanrewaju Ogunmafun found his voice as a teenage lead tenor in his Nigerian church choir.
It was Music Foundation, but I just rebelled out with rap.
First of all, let's get it clear. I'm not going anywhere.
As Vector the Viper, he's one of Nigeria's stars and part of an African contingent bringing their sound to the US while challenging stereotypes.
Some energy, yeah.
Whilst I was studying philosophy, I hated the fact that my lecturers always said the Western world didn't think Africans could rationalize enough to have a philosophy. And that rubbed off wrongly on me, and I felt with my music I'd show the world that we can reason.
Vector is one of 36 artists playing the biggest showcase of African music ever seen at the South by Southwest Festival in Texas. a southern state which owes so much to the continent. The slave trade brought Africans to the United States, and with them, influences on just about any kind of music you can think of, from blues to jazz to hip-hop. And yet, despite all those influences, the current administration under President Donald Trump hasn't really engaged with Africa. Trump may have hosted African leaders at the White House, but his derogatory remarks about some African countries caused significant diplomatic fallout, though Vector seems philosophical about it.
It's a norm. Africa's been frowned upon over the years. Africa's been condescended upon over the years. I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware that away from all those things, there's greatness as well.
You should let me be a player for the weekend.
Just ask Rihanna and Drake, megastars who've both collaborated with the likes of Nigeria's Wizkid, prompting American record label RCA to sign him to a multi-album deal. It's great exposure in the US, but it's also an opportunity to grow fan bases back home, where predominantly young populations are spending more and more on new mobile music streaming services.
The market for them is actually in Africa. If you make enough noise, enough good music in Africa, you have the numbers. And once the brands start seeing you've got the numbers, they start paying attention. Once the brands pay attention, the media pays attention as well, and then you have your stage.
Too strong after all these years of all this type of tests, and I may leave you soon and get adopted by this mother, but home is home. And only my mother could be my mother, and this African business, 100. Ha!
Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
183 ancient treasures from the Forbidden City have started their 2-month-long visit to Monaco. Initiated by the Grimaldi Forum, the largest convention center in the tiny European country, large-scale cultural exchanges like this one have been approved by the King of Monaco. And right now we do want to actually go live for you to Paris, just outside the Élysée Palace, where President Xi Jinping is alongside President Emmanuel Macron for an official state visit. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Le troisième accord est un protocole entre le ministère de l'Agriculture et de l'Alimentation et l'administration générale des douanes sur la quarantaine et les conditions sanitaires pour les exportations de viande de poulet,
by both President Xi Jinping and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. Right now you can hear a flurry of French being spoken here, but this is looks like it's inside the Élysée Palace actually. And what we do know is that there was a welcoming ceremony just earlier today for President Xi Jinping. That was outside the Arc de Triomphe. And then he made his way to the Élysée Palace, just a couple of kilometers away from being welcomed at the Arc de Triomphe. And this is actually the second day that these two leaders have met. They met in the southeastern city of Nice, and right now what we are seeing are different members of the delegations from the French and the Chinese who have participated in the signing of a series of agreements, and I am joined in the studio here by Professor Zhong Gong, University of International Business and Economics. And Professor, as we look live here, we learned from our correspondent on the ground there outside of the palace, Stefan de Vries, that there will be something like 30 agreements signed, and we know that aerospace is one of them, as well as nuclear power, clean energy as well. Talk a bit about, the biggest ones that these two countries are truly going to be cooperating on.
I'm guessing it's probably in aerospace. It's aerospace and aerospace. We've already had a lot of cooperation in the airline industry, the airplane manufacturing industry. I think probably a lot of activities as well in the aerospace area.
and nuclear power. How important is that in terms of these two countries coming together to have an agreement on that?
Well, France helped China a lot in terms of establishing China's nuclear power capability. As a matter of fact, France helped China in a couple of areas, being the first Western country to break away from the traditional embargo of these military technologies to China. So our cooperation with France goes very deep and goes many years ago. But looking back, I think French companies haven't done as well as German companies here in the Chinese market. If you take the automobile industry as an example,
absolutely, yeah.
The two brands of France under PSA, the Citroën and Peugeot, haven't been performing as well as Volkswagen and the other two German luxurious brands. That's a little bit of a pity. But the French companies has their strength, as I said. Airplane is definitely dominant in the world. It's a pride, I think. When we talk about Airbus, I think it's mostly France, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're just joining us now, you are looking live in the French capital of Paris. Here we are inside the Elysee Palace, and you can see there we've got members of the French and Chinese delegations who have just signed a series of agreements, and you can see them shaking hands as they announce each agreement that each side reached, essentially, here. And behind them, you see French President Emmanuel Macron alongside Chinese President Xi Jinping. And again, this is Xi Jinping's official state visit to France, his third leg of his European tour, which kicked off in Italy, then Monaco, and now France. And Professor Zhang Gong, I do want to point something that you had mentioned before, was that China-France relationship really means a lot to the whole world when you take a look at China's relationship with the EU as a whole, and France being a very important part of the European Union. All right, and that does it for this special edition of The World Today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Erica Pizzi, live from CGTN headquarters here in Beijing. Thanks for watching, and take care.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese President Xi Jinping in Paris on his third leg of European tour. Aid group says Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo is growing, with 58 new cases reported. And while the risk of waterborne diseases in Mozambique increases, aid agencies gear up to move tons of aid in and around Beira. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Butcher joins me now with all your business headlines. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Plane manufacturer Boeing gets commitments from Ethiopia and Qatar as investigations into the 737 MAX continue. And the 2019 edition of the Africa CEO Forum kicks off in Kigali, Rwanda. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now it's back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Ucha. We start with President Xi Jinping's ongoing state visit to France. President Xi Jinping has arrived at the Élysée Palace, where he's expected to hold a round-table meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron. Beijing and Paris will be signing a series of cooperation agreements in fields like nuclear power and aerospace. Well, earlier, a welcoming ceremony was held for the Chinese president at the Arc de Triomphe. This is the third leg of President Xi's European tour. On Tuesday, he'll meet with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. Well, the Chinese and French leaders celebrated this year's 55th anniversary of diplomatic ties on Sunday. President Xi said China's further opening up will bring new opportunities and a bigger market for bilateral cooperation.
A private dinner at a villa by the Mediterranean coast. A chance for a personal touch as the French and Chinese leaders begin their highly anticipated summit. Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan arrived late Sunday afternoon in Nice and were welcomed by French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian. French President Emmanuel Macron was waiting at the villa. Xi stressed that maintaining a sound bilateral relationship is vital to long-term development of both countries and to their potential impact on the world. He said China and France share consistent visions for the future and both value the spirits of independence and self-reliance. Macron said the two sides are important strategic partners and should deepen cooperation in multiple fields. On Monday, they're expected to talk more about bilateral ties and China-EU ties. The two sides will sign a series of energy agreements, including cooperation in nuclear power and aerospace. The two leaders are also set to meet with EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Tuesday.
To Mozambique, and the risk of waterborne diseases is increasing as a result of flooding from cyclone Idai. Humanitarian agencies and authorities are gearing up to move the tons of aid that have been accumulating in and around Beira and other collection points in the region. Angelo Coppola reports now from Beira.
The good weather has played its part in the last week, allowing some of the water levels to recede and rescue operations to ramp up.
The number of people saved in the INGC camps has increased to 128,941. At the moment, the conditions on the grounds are improving. We managed to repulse communication by road, which is helping the teams that are supposed to deliver services and help to the communities. We are more organized now after the chaos that we had, so we're delivering food and shelter to more people today.
While the organized camps have large groups of people under care, the more isolated communities were taken to higher ground and congregated there.
We're going to all the high points, expecting to find people, and we're finding a lot of people there. So those are not camps, but are targeted areas to supply food and shelter in the next hours and days ahead.
All of this is now possible today as the water level has subsided and the road to the key bridge on the N6 has been diverted by the Mozambican authorities, who built a new temporary road so that aid agencies can get those supplies to where they are needed.
So it'll head up the road, down the road. And we've got recce teams out now. They're meeting with community leaders wherever we find population centres, and then we'll distribute through community leaders. In this part of the world, that's how it works best.
While the weather forecast appears favourable in the immediate vicinity, there were initial concerns further upstream.
The controlled releases of the dams on the Zambezi are looking good. We're supporting government with some dam experts who are coming in to look at those to see if there's any damage to those or any risk of a breach.
With the roads opening up both north and south, the trucks that are needed to get those supplies out to those communities can start flowing now. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Beira, Mozambique.
To Kenya now, and there are reports of deaths resulting from the ongoing drought affecting parts of the country. The government says it is yet to receive any reports, and so far there is no official confirmation of drought-related deaths. CGTN's Robert Nagila is currently in Baringo County, one of the drought-stricken areas, about 300 kilometres from the capital, Nairobi. He filed this report.
A few meters from a dilapidated structure in Kamasuk village, Baringo County, a heap of stones covered with dry shrubs to prevent animals digging up the soil stares at us. It's a grave, barely a week old, of 61-year-old Stephen Lokidop.
He left that morning to go work on a neighbor's farm. At about 12:30, we were informed someone had died. We asked who and what had killed him. We rushed down from the hills and found he was dead.
A local elder says Stephen had sought some temporary work to feed his starving family.
His family had stayed for 4 days without food. He went to look for work to earn money to buy food.